Yes, welcome to the No Snake Project, live from the fortified compound in Mesa, Arizona. Glad to be with you here. It is Wednesday. It is 2/20. It's February 20th, 2019. Glad to be with you here. Appreciate people tuning in as they start filing into the big show. I want to thank everybody for the continued support of the big show. I do appreciate that. Very much needed. I do appreciate whatever you can do. If you want to help support the show, it's in the show notes in the description, but it's markstevens.cells.com. You can also just go to my website, markstevens.net, and you can help support the show that way. Just tremendous, continued support from good people like Bill and Dan up in New Hampshire and Marc, freezing up there, and I think it's Wisconsin. But speaking of Wisconsin, I actually got two success stories from Wisconsin. I don't have any details other than it's traffic, but I will post that in another video. I did get somebody else's from the East Coast, their documentation, so I'll put them all in that video. So I'll have the three success stories for two people. So congratulations there. But I'll get into that. I got a lot of other things to get to here today. But I do appreciate the continued support of the show, especially, yesterday. Things happen, and your faith in humanity, I've been saying a lot lately, people are the worst. And I got into the good example of that yesterday. Not a man of means. Most everybody here knows that, even, except for those few people who think that I'm shilling for the Jews. I get, but if I see somebody in need, I do what I can to help. I give something. I mean, I don't have a lot, but if I have something, I like to be able to help somebody. So this guy seemed particularly bad. He was in a wheelchair. He only had one leg, and I had to walk up and give him a few bucks. And before I gave him the money, I asked him his name, and so he gives me his name. He starts telling me some of the things that had happened, and he had gotten out of the hospital this week, and it turns out that some pieces of garbage decided to beat him up. So they knocked him out of his wheelchair, and this guy started kicking him, and so what he told me was that he woke up in the hospital, and a police officer was was in there shortly after he woke up. And so a police officer letting him know what had happened to him, and that the assailant, the perp, the piece of garbage who actually initiated the attack against this guy, again, he's in a wheelchair, and he only has one leg. And you gotta be a real SOB to do something like that. I mean, I'm talking politician level scumbag. I'm talking Dick Noble worthy, or George Bush worthiness. And from what the cop had told him was that the perp was actually down the hallway in the intensive care unit, also in far, far, far worse condition. So it turns out a couple of guys on active duty military saw the attack start, and they decided that they intervened, and they finished it, and they were able to call an ambulance and get this guy taken care of. I don't think I necessarily would have called an ambulance for the guy who knocked somebody out of a wheelchair. Kind of reminds me of Joe Arpaio's guys who broke a guy in a wheel. He came in as a paraplegic and left as a quadriplegic because they deemed that this guy, I'm sorry I don't remember his name, I'll have to look it up for the video, which I will be pulling this video down tomorrow, and you guys know the deal with the good video, good audio. Anyway, Joe Arpaio's guys, about 10 years ago, so maybe even more, took a guy who was, in a wheelchair and decided that he was a threat to the officer's safety, and they put him into a restraint chair, and they broke his neck. They didn't kill him, but he did leave as a paraplegic, quadriplegic, so he was paralyzed from the neck down. Unlike the police officers who did it, who were paralyzed from the neck up. No real brain activity, at least that part that makes you human, that makes you a real person, that the circuits for empathy, and really, this is wrong. This is wrong. You know, this whole thing, well, morality is subjective. Nah. No, you've got healthy, normal people who have empathy and feel bad when they do bad things. And then you've got damaged individuals, or individuals we call psychopaths or sociopaths, antisocial personality, where that circuit doesn't work anymore. They can show that in brain scans. So the idea that morality is subjective, yeah, I'm gonna have to go ahead and disagree with you there. Yeah, actually, it's the 20th anniversary this week of Office Space, so it's kind of fitting to throw in a Lumberg there. Anyway, they'd wind up breaking the guy's neck. The idea, you know, just to be able to bring someone to the point, to be so brainwashed into the system, that you would, put that, just how a kind of person can look you straight in the eye and say, I know this guy's in a wheelchair, and I know he's in the police department. He's got no weapons on him. He's in the police department. He's already been frisked for whatever, because, you know, he could have some dangerous hands. But we still considered him enough of a threat to our safety that we had to get him out of the chair, and we had to put him into a restraint chair. As if just taking him out of the chair itself would have been enough to neutralize. Oh my gosh. But, some faith in humanity restored, because I was able to, you know, I'm able to work and be associated with people like Bill and Dan in New Hampshire and Marc and those who, you know, who've helped support the show. And again, if you want, it's at markstevens.net or markstevens.sales.com. I do appreciate that. And, you know, I talk about tax agents because I speak to them probably more often than any other type of bureaucrat. Most politicians won't speak to me. Prosecutors don't want, I mean, these guys are, you know, prosecutors just don't like to talk, period. They, unless they're getting paid. But they, so they tend, I tend not to get too many call of shames with prosecutors. But, I did speak with a tax agent today. It was a franchise tax board. And they say on their form letter, if you disagree, you call and present your evidence. I'm not one to turn down something like that. If, we disagree with an assessment, it's usually because we've got some evidence. Or we've done, we've done an investigation and we can see that there isn't any evidence. So everybody here, except for those who are really new to the show, you know how I like to do things. I like to confront the agents directly on the phone. And then I get the date and the time, and I get their names, I get their badge number if that's what they got. And then I ask them some questions. So it's no different here. So what's the facts? So I'm speaking to a woman named Hanson. Franchise tax board. I've spoken with her before. She doesn't like to be questioned. You'll understand why. Well, probably if you've been listening to the show, watching the show, you know it's because government, just men and women forcing people to give the money, criminals. And you know, forcing other people to pay you means never having to have a rational argument. You just, well, we don't need an argument. We'll just take your stuff. The employee's gonna let us, even if it's 100% garnishment. How about phone call? We don't have to care. See, those in positions of power, where they're treated as having a moral right to be immoral, in other words, government, they don't have to care. They don't have to care. Why should they care if they paralyze somebody? Why should they give a damn that they hurt somebody who wasn't a threat to them? Why should they give a damn if they're engaged in behavior that if the average person was doing, it would be considered grossly immoral? I'm going to get to the calls. I do appreciate that. I'm going to get to the calls, everybody. But I gotta get this out, or I won't be. You guys know how I do it. If I have some updates, I gotta do them before I take the calls. So I'm talking, and so I said, the evidence is that the franchise tax board's assessment is invalid. Is that, and I give date. I said on August, I think it was August 18, 2018. We spoke to Ramon, and I had his number. I don't remember off the top of my head, like 1156, something like that. Not important. So I said, our position is we don't believe that the franchise tax board's assessment is valid because, after speaking to Ramon on this date in August of 2018, and after speaking to you, Ms. Hansen, based on your admissions that you had no actual facts, that you had no actual evidence to support the foundational claims of the assessment, that your assessment was invalid. Those are the facts. You admittedly have no evidence to support your claim. Those are my facts. So she threw out, that's a frivolous tax argument. So I'm trying to, I've got to keep my composure here. Because I've already spoken to Miss Hansen. I know she is as dishonest as the day is long. So, all right. So I stick to my leading questions, or you must be aware that every single one of the frivolous tax arguments are legal interpretation. Legal interpretation, not issues of fact like we just raised. It's legal interpretation, such as and I said, an actual frivolous argument, tax argument is, I'm not a taxpayer within meaning of statute. Okay? That's legal interpretation. We're talking about the actual admission from the agent himself, not able to support the franchise tax board's legal claim. Because that's what's actually frivolous. She hit me with, it's a frivolous argument thing. So again, she's not answering my question regarding that. So again, what I restate, you do understand that all the frivolous arguments that you're talking about are legal interpretation. She doesn't want to answer the question. I said, could you give me one single appellate court that has held that an issue of fact, especially one based on the agent's own admissions, is indeed a frivolous tax argument? Well, I'm not going to answer. I'm not going to answer that. Well, of course I'm not going to answer that. What the hell can I do? Anyway, so she doesn't want to answer that question. So I said, well, what particular, are you working out of Sacramento? And she says, I don't want to tell you that. Why do you want to know? I said, I just want to know. I just want to know. Are you working out of Sacramento? Yes or no? She says, I'm not comfortable telling you that. I said, oh yeah, I want to say, because I'm the one threatening to take property. I'm the one threatening other people over here. I'm the one on the phone that you need to be afraid of. So I actually tell her, I said, well, because we have a hearing scheduled before the Board of Tax Appeals. I want to know how to, because we're going to have to subpoena you. She says, well, you can just send it to our legal department. Either way, I wasn't going to find out where she is. But we do have a full name. So she doesn't want to answer. Again, if somebody's claiming it's a frivolous tax argument, they should be able to cite a court case that says that's a frivolous tax argument. It's in the literature. You can look it up. But because no appellate court has ever held that an issue of fact is automatically frivolous. Again, I've mentioned this on the show before. If they ever come out and say that your argument that that the prosecution or your accuser lacks evidence, if they ever say that that is frivolous, the game is over. There's no pretense of fairness. They're not even trying anymore. You have no due process. You have no fairness. It doesn't exist. Because if your argument is the prosecution has no evidence to support A, B, or C, and you're wrong and they do have the evidence, you're just wrong. It doesn't mean that your argument is frivolous. Frivolous is so bad and brought in bad faith, it doesn't require any demonstration to show that it's bad. It's just bad on its face. It's like arguing that every lawyer is a member of the Crown Court, and that it means that an esquire is still to this day, 200 something years later, literally a English title of nobility. You have to have evidence. It's ridiculous on its face. There's no actual proof. Using this Jordan Maxwell etymology, if you can call it that. Well, bar stands for something accredited registry, barrister accredited registry. It's all in London. London. So, anyway. Truly frivolous argument requires no demonstration, such as when the Franchise Tax Board says, our laws apply to you because we say so. That's a frivolous argument. That is brought in bad faith. That has no evidence. Not only does it have no evidence, there is an army of shills that will actually defend it and say, only an idiot would require evidence when someone makes a claim like that. They just do. They apply because they do. Because we said so. So I try to nail her down on the actual argument that we're making. Do you believe that my position, that Ramon admitted to not having evidence to support his claim, do you believe that that itself is a frivolous tax argument? Wouldn't answer the question. Absolutely refused to answer the question. Now, why? If these tax agents are spokesmen and servants of God, right? All these Republicans, God is, government is instituted of God. Romans? How many of these religious people bringing that out? Render unto Caesar what is Caesar's. Romans 13, Alice Jones, yes. Yeah, Odin himself, right? So if my position that Ramon admitted to not having evidence, and that showed that the Franchise Tax Board couldn't support their claim, if that itself is a frivolous argument, just say yes. Why would you refuse to answer the question? Because any half-idiot knows it's not a frivolous argument. But what they do is they want to shut down communication, which is, Mark, Mr. Stevens, you know you got him when all they can do is repeat your name. Mr. Stevens! Mr. Stevens! Mr. Stevens, I've already told you the Franchise Tax Board's position on this. And she goes through and, about the assessment being, I understand. I know what your position is. I'm asking you some follow-up questions. You just accused me of raising a frivolous argument. Is saying that Ramon on August 17th of 2018, when he admitted he couldn't provide any facts or evidence to support the Franchise Tax Board's legal claim, is that a frivolous argument? I am not going to answer the question. She couldn't even go back and say, and try to get something. All she could do is just refuse to answer the question. Because they're not dealing with, you're not dealing with someone. I even asked her about good faith. I said, so you accuse me of making a frivolous argument. When I ask you if my argument is actually frivolous, you refuse to answer the question. Do you believe that that is acting in good faith? I'm not going to answer the question. Not going to answer the question. Because I said, what, if you called me and you're doing a tax examination on me, and I refuse to answer your questions, would you consider me acting in good faith? I'm not going to answer the question. I am not comfortable. Well, I had already said we're going to subpoena her, if necessary, to appear at a hearing next month. So she has no evidence. She doesn't have good faith, right? She's not entirely stupid. Oh yeah, let me just keep running my mouth off with this guy who's going to put me on the stand in a month. Well, that's the plan. The goal is to get some of these people into the hearing on cross-examination. And whether we're going to actually accomplish that, that's another thing. So we have a hearing set for April 23rd in Los Angeles. Now, last time I had gone, I went to Culver City, which is just outside of Los Angeles. And even though it was less than 60 miles from San Bernardino, it took me 3 full hours to get there. I walked in the door at 9:01, 9:09. I mean, I technically was a little late. 3 hours. Probably take closer to 4 to get to Los Angeles. We'll see. We'll see. I have a call into, and we did a call to shame with the agent who said it was an assumption. The foundation of the Franchise Tax Board, entire case, the whole thing rests on the foundation of if you're physically in California, the laws apply, bitch. That's the whole foundation. And the Franchise Tax Board's counsel admitted it was an assumption. Well, that's not reasonable and rational. So hopefully, I think we're gonna have to do it. Look, we're not kidding. I'm not kidding anybody here. We're gonna have subpoenas issued. If they're not issued, we won't have our witnesses. They're not going to have. Counsel is not going to have these witnesses all appear in Los Angeles without a subpoena. They're not. So we shall see. But in addition to that, remember, there is no presumption of correctness unless it's based on fact. So they make their prima facie case, whether it's in or out of court. So when we're talking about taxes here, they make a prima facie case by having some facts that it's reasonable and rational. Now, if the foundation, the very foundation of their case, which rests on the claim, if you're physically in California or have a California source of income, money, then the Constitution applies and gives them jurisdiction to assess and collect the tax. The foundation is, if you're physically in California, the Constitution applies. Counsel admittedly, he said that the whole foundation is an assumption. That's his word. Well, he agreed. I asked him the leading question. He agreed it was an assumption. So then when I followed up, he said, well, is an assumption reasonable and rational? He knew enough. No, we're done. We're done. See, I don't think you need to answer a question like that for people to draw a reasonable inference. Okay? You're not answering the question because you know the answer is no. You know it's not reasonable and rational, and you don't want to admit that your position is, which is an assumption, is unreasonable, and that you have no presumption of correctness. So the first thing we got to do is we have to file a motion to strip the Franchise Tax Board of their presumption of correctness. Now, I don't want to report more institutional corruption, but I have a pretty good suspicion. See, this is where inductive reasoning, when you have such a history of them doing this, you can go based on your prior experience when they have, we have a 100% loss record for the issue of presumption of correctness. 100% of the time. So that's why I can use some inductive reasoning and logic that we don't stand a very good chance of them doing that. I don't want to report that on the show, but I'm probably going to have to report, and I will have the names of the members of the Board of Tax Appeals that are not going to strip them. And then, of course, I may have to show up in Los Angeles or do it telephonically, where you'll be able to hear them. The agent admitted it was an assumption. They have to strip it. So if we have to even go toe-to-toe at the hearing, the man admitted it on the phone. Admitted it. And I have a witness. Well, it's just you and your client's word against his. Put him on the stand right now. Put him under oath and let me ask him the same questions. That's the thing. I can ask the same questions now. Which is what we're going to wind up doing, because when we have the goods... See, this is the thing. This is why I say it's not for hyperbole. It's not for views. They don't need evidence when they are supported by a prison system. Okay? They don't need that. So they can openly admit they have no evidence. They can say, I got nothing. Because they know full well these judges are so corrupt and so dishonest and so just biased in favor of them, they're not going to even do the minimum and strip the tax agency of their presumption of correctness, which, according to their own rules, isn't created unless it's based on fact and is reasonable and rational. I'll have to put the screen caps in the video so you can see this lawyer's or this counsel's actual document that I'm quoting from. I'm not just pulling it out of thin air. So she wound up hanging up on us, saying that the supervisor will call, and someone from the legal department, which I've spoken to them many times. They don't have anything else to offer. See, before I get to the calls, it doesn't matter what the legal department thinks. The only thing that is relevant is what the agent, Ramon, he's like the cop who wrote the traffic ticket. See, because there's such a thing as tampering with a witness. When a police officer writes a ticket, it doesn't matter what the opinion is of the prosecutor. What matters is what the cop based it on. You're not allowed to substitute your own judgment for the witnesses. It's called witness tampering. It's considered a felony. I'm pretty sure it's a felony. You are not supposed to coach these witnesses. You're not supposed to tell a witness what to say. You're not supposed to do that, but they don't have to even do that because they don't even let them talk. It doesn't even rise to that level a lot of times because they won't even allow the police officer to testify. Objection calls for a legal conclusion. The witness is not qualified to testify. I didn't ask for a legal conclusion. I asked for facts. How about fungal? We don't need it. We don't need it. All right. I'm going to get to the calls here. I will keep everybody updated on what happens. If we get our subpoena, if they strip the Franchise Tax Board of their false presumption of correctness, we'll see if this FTB counsel, are they going to lie? I never said it was an assumption. But, okay, well, let's talk about the issue right now. Because the presumption of correctness should be stripped. That's the issue before we get anybody on the stand or before anybody starts making arguments from the appeal. We need to discuss the presumption of correctness because that affects what happens here at the hearing today. Because if the presumption of correctness is stripped from the Franchise Tax Board, I can bet that they're probably going to want to withdraw their assessment because they're not going to be even remotely ready to try to get that back, to try to, do that. Chances are they're not going to bring any agents with them who are responsible. So for those who are new, imagine going to a hearing and they don't have the cops show up. All right. This might be against my better judgment, but we're gonna bring Tom back on the show. Even though Tom, you've been pretty mad at me lately.
Up and down, agreed, but we're not going to go there, and I'm not going to do anything silly. All right, you're having a really good conversation tonight on tax situations, which I find more interesting than traffic ticket situations. But I'd like to tie them together a little bit and give you my opinion of how to use the Marcratic method the best and most efficient way to stop the state and help us. So here we go.
Okay.
The way I look at it in a traffic ticket situation, I think the best thing we can do is what I call a good bluff. We use your paperwork. We send it in, the motion to dismiss and understand it. The person has to fully grasp what this thing is. And then that's the concept. Ask for discovery, whatever that may be blown away. Get the Brady, ask for it. That might be washed aside, blah, blah, blah. Show up to that arraignment, and we know that if they get us past arraignment, we're lost. So my goal, what I try to tell people is, listen, let's try to get the damage control. Throw in the bluff. Try to walk away with hell. It might even get a dismissal. The prosecutor might not want to respond, whatever. And you walk out and you walk free. The total damage control. Other than that, to me, when these guys, and I understand we want We want the court to understand we're building an appeal. Yes, Judge, I'm asking these questions because if it looks like you're going to have to be there and argue, I'm asking these questions and I'm asking these objection point of these clarifications to build my appeal. Yeah, a little bit of more of a bluff. But in actuality, to do an appeal on a traffic ticket is stupid. It's a waste of your own time and funds. Go in there, take up as much time as you can from the court originally, file your paperwork, blah, 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 walk out with some damage control, and hopefully open some eyes. Now, how does that work in a tax case? How do you see the best damage control work in a tax attack?
How do I see it?
Yeah, how do you see this? Like what I just explained, my idea of getting real simple damage control without going into too deep, my opinion is completely the appeal on a traffic court case is just don't waste your time. It's stupid. It's like finding a unicorn. And you've now learned it. You can spread the information. If 3% of the people tried this in court, it would bog it down. That's what I see us getting somewhere. Now my question is, how does it work in tax court? When I get my letter from the IRS, which I will, okay, I want to know how do I approach this in the simplest damage control? How do I use your paperwork in that case, in that situation?
Well, we always follow up our phone calls with a detail of what happened. And we want to escalate this. We want, as far as we want to go up the chain of command. I want to get as many supervisors involved with this. So, when they know that when I call, this is not the only call. It's going to be followed up in writing, and I am going to go as far up the chain of command as possible. And just like you're saying, in court, I'm trying to tie up as much of their time. I want them to just, I'm not saying it's not right to say I want, but I want them to just abhor the idea of speaking to me again because it's so uncomfortable to talk to me because you don't give them an inch. You're constantly calling them out on their BS and holding their feet to the fire. So, and then if they, depending on where you are.
I'm not in the situation yet where they're attacking me. What is generally the first attack from the IRS? Let's say whatever they're claiming you're pretty knowledgeable about this because you've dealt with a lot of people. What is the first letter in general that the IRS says? An audit or what have you seen?
The first letter is typically not with the people that I work with is that there's no tax return on file. That if a return is not required, then let us know. If a return is required, then please have it done by such and such a date, or the agency will do that for you. That is 99% of the time the first letter that people get.
I see. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. And whatever, I haven't filed in years and I don't plan on it. So eventually that will be the first thing that comes. So now, let's say that comes in the mail. And so what would be, again, you don't give suggestions. You're not a lawyer. I'm not holding you to the fire at all. I do what I do. So what would you do if you got that letter? What, they obviously want to talk to you about your returns that you haven't filed. So what would you do?
Well, an example is like when we had the 6 years thrown out, and I have the documents up there and the history of what I actually did and what I do. So what I suggest doing, what I do, and I freely suggest this, get on the phone as soon as you can, get to an agent that has some responsibility or a discretion or authority to at least put a stay on the proceedings. Okay? You don't want to talk to somebody that can't possibly help correct the situation.
Right.
Now, I know they're going to lie to you. They're going to say, well, it depends on the situation. So I tell them, well, what if there's no actual evidence to support your legal claim of jurisdiction against me? That is usually intriguing enough and pricks their arrogance, so they'll continue. And so just like what we did at the franchise tax board I was talking about today, we ask Ramon, we walk him through the process. You guys operate under the presumption that if I'm physically in California, or here we'll talk to the IRS, if I'm physically in the United States, then your laws apply and give you jurisdiction to assess and collect the tax. And, well, yeah, that's how it works. Yeah, of course. Then you ask them for any actual evidence to support that the claim is true. And you write down the answers and use those against them. Usually,
that's a typical traffic court strategy as well. Okay,
sure.
That sounds perfectly reasonable. Yep.
Well, we're following the basic principle of logic. We want to know what their claim is.
Yep.
And and once we know what the claim is, now we can start asking some leading questions and asking for evidence to show that either the claim is true or it's not. Now, typically what will happen is, again, you got to get them at the first form letter like we're talking about. That really helps. If it's escalated a bit, it's a different story. So then we want to, if there's resistance to dropping the assessment completely, then we can move them, because usually now they're saying, I'm not even in the right department. But you would agree that it would be fair that while we're trying to get to the right department, that this doesn't escalate, because that wouldn't be any fault of me, because I'm trying to resolve it. And 97% of the time,
doing your good faith.
Yeah, they will put a stay on the computer process, even if it's just 30 days. To me, that is huge. And I don't care. Look, if you can get the if you can get the IRS even for 30 days to stop that process, you are well above the curve, and it's so much better than what you get on TV or with a lawyer who's trying to make a deal. Okay, stopping that computer.
How does that really help? How does 30 days? I mean, 30 days is a short period of time.
Yeah.
And I get you got one over on them, kind of, sort of, but how does that really help?
Because when we follow up in writing so let's say we have the two things we have to do. We have to follow up in writing with what actually just happened, with the agent's name and badge number, and his admissions. You have to quote him directly. And you put in the letter. I put right in there. This is a issue of fact that is based on the agent's own statements. This is not a frivolous argument. If you claim that this is a frivolous argument and put it through the mail in an effort to take my money, that could be considered mail fraud. You're knowingly making false statements. So I put that in there. I put in Helving versus Taylor and Adamson versus Commissioner, so they know that issues of fact, no matter how much people on the internet think otherwise, issues of fact and challenging them on the evidence is not a frivolous argument. So we get that. We also want to follow up and try to get with the right department. 90% of the time, when we do this from the start, we only have a 30 or a 60-day stay initially. What will happen is we'll get the series of 45-day letters. And I recommend that when you get the 45-day letter, you call and make sure you still have the stay. Because typically when we get the 45-day letters and then the 90-day letters, which say, we got your information, we need more time, but usually when we get that, what we get is an open-ended stay, so that they have the opportunity to resolve.
Right. Huh. Very interesting. Well, I'm glad I'm sure you got other callers. Thanks for taking this time out, because that's now I have this video. I can always refer to it and the steps that I might want to take. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Appreciate the call. Night. Yeah, Tom in the Big D. Dealing with these tax agents, and we do have the lines are open. We got a little more time for the show. None of this is to try to convince anybody who's going to or may get attacked by the IRS, or if you're getting attacked by the IRS. I can document the success that I've had with the Franchise Tax Board in California, the Arizona Department of Revenue, other tax agencies, and especially the Internal Revenue Service. Dealing with them is not fun. Even when I'm not under attack, I still get that tightening in the stomach when somebody sends me an email and there's a document attached. It's not fun. It's not always easy. I will say that if the matter has escalated to any degree, it's bad. It's bad. If you are already at a point where they want to do an audit, it's bad. If they want to do an audit, They're going to do an audit. You cannot win against an IRS summons. I know I haven't been in front of every single court, but I've been through enough and I've heard from enough people and I have seen the lies that judges are willing to go and do in order to protect the Internal Revenue Service. I've seen it. I've seen it firsthand. I have watched a guy named Beastline allow a prosecutor named Bradley call our friend in Alaska a tax cheat right in front of the jury. Nothing. Yes, I should have said something right then and there, because Beastline looked over at the public defenders who were sitting there on their phone. Nothing. That is something that it should not require. The judge should have done something there. Oh, hold on a minute there, Mr. Bradley. You can't call him a tax cheat in a tax trial in front of the jury. Nothing. Nothing. Even when it was brought up later, nothing. Nothing was done. I've seen it too many times. Too many times. I've shown where Michael B. Thornton, I have the documents on markstevens.net. Michael Rakin was district counsel, admitted on the record more than once, had no evidence, none, against the person that they did the assessment against. He admitted they had no evidence. They had no evidence tying her to the money. They literally took the husband's name off of the assessment, put the wife's name on, admitted they had no evidence that she earned this money and had any connection to it. And the laws are clear, or the principle, they don't have a presumption of correctness unless it's based on fact, and they admit there's no fact. What does Michael B. Thornton do? Ignores it. Denied. Why does he deny it? Because it did not come from the IRS. Everything you and I put in will be at the tax court, the United Federal Tax Court. Everything that you and I do will be summarily denied. One word, denied. Everything that the IRS asks for, everything will be granted. No questions asked. They have a 99 or 100% success rate. I told you I had McLean. He was a retired lawyer. He got out of the tax court. He was district counsel. He quit and went into private practice because he couldn't believe how corrupt those tax court judges were. He actually quit as district counsel. He couldn't believe how there's just no way. These people are making valid arguments. They're winning their case, but the judges are rejecting it. John McLean. That's right. How do you forget a name like John McLean? John McLean. There are other examples. Other example I've given, which hopefully this is not going to happen. We'll get a break. They won't acknowledge that the Anti-Injunctive Tax Act has a narrow exception. I did a whole show about that. That is institutional bias. That does not change by just getting on the internet saying I'm an idiot and saying, well, the judges don't like the IRS anyway. No, they may not like them, but they certainly rule on their behalf. We had a judge lie. We had a damn CD of the call with Evan Moses, a CD of the call. Not only did the trial court judge lie that it didn't exist, the appellate panel did. 3 of the 3 appellate panel judges all lied, saying we didn't have any evidence at all. They didn't say, well, his admissions notwithstanding don't rise to the level of impeachment. It doesn't even rise to the level, Mark, you non-lawyer idiot, you. If you went to law school, you would understand. Just because he admitted to not having any evidence doesn't mean he wasn't qualified and competent to make the statements in the affidavit. They couldn't even make something like that up because there's no way in the world we're going to get review of that at the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court doesn't review tax cases. It's extremely rare. Extremely rare. So, institutional corruption. So, if you are at the level where it's escalated to that, you can fight it. You're going to lose. And you're going to lose bad. I'm not saying not to fight them tooth and nail and expose them. Maybe there'll be a magistrate or somebody be like, you gotta at least give the guy we have to feign due process here. I can't just say that there's no evidence. He's got a CD. Again, look, would you put him on the stand? It'll be like traffic court. I'm not gonna let you ask him anything damaging. I'm not gonna allow this guy to put an IRS agent on a stand and embarrass the IRS. We're not gonna do that. They let it happen they put Bruce Gilbert on the stand. And he testified he didn't know. Of course, the judge threw a sissy fit and started screaming about having Marc deported. Yeah, that's something the critics did. Yeah, the judge that they can't stop kissing the judge's ass. They don't stop and say, hey, let's try to make an argument for a judge screaming like a child, like a 5-year-old, about deporting Marc, who was born in Wyoming. Yeah, I don't see the critics making any arguments for that scumbag, bottom-feeding, black robe-wearing piece of garbage who was screaming at Marc that he was going to have him deported. He says, I don't understand, sir. I was born and raised right here. I've lived in Wyoming my whole life. Where are you going to deport me to? Should have said, you dummy. You idiot. Yeah, just because you don a robe and went to law school doesn't mean that you're really smart and you know how to argue well. So, the other thing too is if it's escalated to where they've done an assessment or they did a return for you, it's going to make it a hellaciously lot more difficult for you to get that resolved. It's just like any of these situations. And whether you're dealing with me, you're doing it on your own, or you're hiring a lawyer, the more it escalates, the more difficult it's going to be to get it resolved. Because in their mind, if that assessment becomes final, okay, it doesn't mean the same thing to them that it means to me or to you. To them, the hand of Odin has written it. And it is absolutely impervious to challenge. It couldn't possibly be wrong. Couldn't possibly. Are you saying that Odin is wrong? Are you saying that God is wrong? Didn't you read Romans 13? To them, it's written in stone. That's why we cannot just sit by and allow it to escalate. You've got to, make the suggestion again. If you get that letter, where is your tax return? Do not ignore it. Start a record that you can use on your behalf. Doesn't mean that it's ultimately going to get thrown out, but they have to lie incessantly and show such extreme bad faith. And Marc, you got to have a statutory violation. The 1998 Restructuring Act. One of the things we go through, if it doesn't get resolved right away and we get the stay and the 45-day letters, we also put in the letter that you want, according to, as mandated by the 1998 Restructuring Act, you want an agent with direct contact information assigned, and the Act states in 3705, I think, that when you request an agent, they have to assign the agent with direct contact information. No more of these 800 numbers where you sit on the phone for 2 hours. Okay? That, and then when they don't do it, yes, the New York office, where they say it's the high dollar amount, it is their policy not to comply with their own code. I said, but that's the law. That's not our policy, though. So your policy is not to comply with the 1998 Restructuring Act. That's right. And why can she admit this? She can. I'm never going to meet her. I'm never going to be able to get her under subpoena. I'm never going to have a contact with her again. But it is a statutory violation that you have that we have built in. So if it's the only thing you have to get heard in court, you've got a solid statutory violation. They did not assign the agent. At least it opens up the door. But we'll see what happens with our federal case next month. And we also have the Franchise Tax Board case. We'll see what, we have the agents on record. We have the dates and times. If they don't show up, the agents, or they don't let us have the subpoenas, it's clearly a denial of a fair trial. Again, if the agents who did the assessments are not subject to being challenged and are not there in court, how could you possibly have a fair trial? Again, I liken it to a traffic court proceeding. Even there, 99% of the time, the cop has got to be there. They're not going to try to make some stupid excuses. And I would think that even the, critics would say, well, yeah, the cop, yeah, if you don't have witnesses, yeah, you might be a real douchebag, Mark, but yeah, any half idiot, it's no credit to you, Mark, just because you're saying witnesses have to be available at a trial. Any half idiot knows that. But then again, you get these half idiots that defend it every day on my YouTube channel. I do appreciate everyone tuning in today to the big show. I appreciate the support of the show. Of course, Bill, Chris in California, Bill and Dan in New Hampshire, Mark in Wisconsin. Everybody, I can't remember, a few of the other names. Don't take that as a slight, but I do appreciate the support. If you want to help support the show, and I do appreciate it, it's markstevens.cells.com and just at markstevens.net. And if you're being attacked by a bureaucrat and you want to effectively defend yourself, you can get everything's available at markstevens.net. You get templates, books, and if you need a class, still able to do the content. We'll definitely be live this Saturday. So if I did miss somebody today, I apologize. We'll get you on Saturday. But till then, salud.